Chris, are you the kind of person that likes to personalize your belongings?
I think in some ways, yes. I don't necessarily write my name on them or anything, but like I feel like I don't have a specific example either. So, but like I feel like I like to have something that is obviously unique and is mine, but not necessarily by my name. Does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely. I don't do a lot of personalization on a lot of things that I own for the most part. I've gotten a lot of stickers for free over the years, and they might even be cool stickers, but I just don't like to stick them on a water bottle or a laptop or things like that. I like to keep things mostly clean. Not that I'm trying to be unidentifiable, but at the same time, I'm worried I'm going to put the sticker on wrong.
I agree.
Not going to personalize it right. I'm going to hate this thing in a year. So I have commitment issues is what I'm trying to say.
I do too. I actually, now that you're saying this, it relates. I relate to this well because like when I was a kid, I loved a Guitar Hero, and I don't know if you ever had the game, but it came with stickers to put on the guitar.
Yep, never did it.
I didn't put any stickers on the
Of
guitar.
course.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yes. So for the most part, I try to stay away from that kind of thing. But there's one area that I am okay with a little bit of personalization, and it took a while to get to this point. And that was with my license plate on my car. So as you know, when I moved to Ohio, that I got my Ohio plates, I turned in my Indiana plates, and I got a personalized like vanity license plate. And so the license plate is P-Town for anyone who hasn't seen my car. And that's a nickname that one of my friends used to call me. And I thought it would just be kind of a funny little thing to try out some personalization. And I've had it for 6 years. It's $50 a year to get a personalized license plate, which is cheaper than most other states.
It is cheaper. Yeah.
It is cheap enough that I don't feel too stupid about doing it. So I keep renewing it, and I don't mind that I have it on there. And this kind of inspired Amy and I over the past several years to document everyone else's personalized license plates, just that we keep seeing around town, just because we're not the only ones doing this in Columbus. It feels like there are a lot of people around here. I don't know if you feel like up in Cardington you see much of it.
I see some, and I do pay attention to license plates, but I think it hasn't been a standout like everyone does this, at least where I live.
Sure, absolutely. So Amy and I have kind of turned this into like my Pokedex, I guess you could say, where we try to be safe about it, especially if like one of us, the other one's driving, we'll try to take the picture and just like document the plates, and then we can search them up in our photo album later, and we share them with each other. So I wanted to share you some of my favorite license plates that I have found around the area. So we've got ones like Rip My OG.
Okay.
Got Meme Life M3M3LYF.
Okay.
There was one that was UBUN and the number 2. And when I saw that from a distance, I thought, I wonder if this person is into like the phrase Ubuntu in the like African spiritual way, or in the like Linux way.
Yeah, I know about Linux, but
yes, and it's like named after, in the same way that like Hulu is named after like a word in, I don't know, Swahili or something. Like, I was curious, and I wasn't able to, didn't get to go ask the person, hey, are you really into Linux? Or, but like, it's fun to see those plate names and like wonder like what kind of person would, drives a car that puts this thing on it. So I've got to tell you my two favorite ones, because they're both about marital statuses.
Okay.
So this guy lives in my neighborhood, and it's an older man, and he has a wife, but his license plate is WIFENO3. We think it is wife number 3.
Wife number 3.
And we've also seen a woman drive it, so we think that is his wife.
That's her car.
So then, who is wife number 2?
Right. And does her car still have wife NO2 on
no,
the
because
on the
I searced online and no one has wife number 2.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't understand how this happened, basically.
I don't know.
It is a mystery, and I can't go ask the guy, but I want to know. My favorite one, though, is WDWRNFN. What do you think that means?
I don't know. I can't come up with it quick enough.
Well, I think it is widower and fun. I do not have that on authority, but I thought this is the only thing it could be. And it is like a middle-aged guy who, in theory, could be a widower. I've only seen him drive the car on his own. I think he works near where I work. So I've seen his car about 3 times now, but he's even gotten new vehicles and transferred this plate onto the new ones. So he is very committed to this license plate thing. And you got to wonder about
Yeah.
what makes someone want to do to have a personalized plate. But I wanted to tell you about a different way of doing personalized license plates that I think is, I don't know if it's better or worse. Do you know what they do in Dubai?
I know you had to pay a lot of money.
Yes.
I don't know a whole lot about it, but I know like super rare ones are real expensive.
Yes. So they are all number plates.
Yeah.
So yes, they are very expensive. And the idea is that the shorter the license plate number that you have, the more desirable it is. So if we have like 7-digit plates in Ohio, that I don't know what the maximum number of digits you could get in Dubai. And I don't know if it's all the UAE or if it's just the city of Dubai. I don't really know how they handle that on a governmental level. But if you want to be fancy, you want to get down to like a 2-digit license plate. But the prize ones are the 1-digit ones. So there's a guy who has 5 and 7 on both of his Rolls Royces.
Yeah.
And when they get to be desirable enough, you have to get them at auction. You can't just purchase them. You have to like outbid people.
Right.
So I know that number 5, I think it went for like $6.5 million.
Yeah. Wow.
To put that on his car. And then I was just reading about number 1. So there was a guy whose name was Saeed Abdul Ghafoor Khoury. He bought number 1 at auction for $14.6 million. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, this is stupid. Why would you want to do this? It's an ugly plate. It actually appreciates in value.
Wow.
While your car is depreciating.
Yeah.
So in some ways,
you're making up for it.
Yes, you're getting like a 20% like annual return in value is what I read.
Wow.
So
20%.
I don't understand how that works.
I don't
but
know.
Yes, like think about how much you lose when you drive your car off the lot.
Right.
So maybe they do know what they're doing over there.
I don't know.
In Dubai.
There is a chance though, like the only cars that appreciate in value are probably the cars these people are putting these license plates
just
on.
kidding.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so what kind of Rolls Royces depreciating?
Right.
What am I saying?
Right.
Yes. And allegedly I guess that the proceeds go to charity on this. I don't know what, but that makes me feel slightly better about just the craziness of the license plates. So I guess like while I wouldn't mind if we tone down a little bit of our like over the top bumper sticker car culture.
Right.
I can't stand the Salt Life stickers.
Sure.
Especially like if you live in Ohio,
Right.
there's not, we do not have an ocean in Columbus. But like I do think I prefer our system to what they have in Dubai.
Sure.
I think being able to have letters and numbers is just more fun. And I'm sure I would get excited if I ever saw like a single or double digit number like in in Dubai and say, oh my gosh, that person must be so cool. But nothing to me is funnier to when you see a guy who uses his car to tell you that he is a widower and also fun.
Welcome to the Factoid Podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you about it anyway. My name's Chris Humphreys.
And I'm Peyton Gessel.
So, Peyton, I was going to start this out by asking you, do you have a nickname? But now we know the answer to that. P-Town.
Yes.
Do you have other ones?
Oh, I've got plenty.
Do you?
One of my hobbies is telling people that so-and-so, blank was my nickname in high school as a joke.
That's funny.
Yes, there have been a lot of good ones over the years. Most of them are not really appropriate, I would say.
Sure.
Like usually they need to be kind of weird. But yeah, as far as real nicknames, I actually played a game with some of my friends where I had them all send me their nicknames in high school, and we scrambled them all on a list, and we had everyone guess. So,
that's fun.
So the nickname that I used, which was one of my nicknames in high school, was Monkey Arms. Because
Monkey Arms.
Yes. So my wingspan is about 6 inches longer than my height.
So is mine.
I didn't realize.
Crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm 6'4" in the arms, and I'm 6 foot, so I'm 4 inches longer.
So that was definitely something that stood out when you are, when I was about the same height as I am now, but I weighed 50 pounds less, which is, I was probably like 130, 140 pounds in high school on the basketball team.
Sure.
So when you're playing shirts and skins at basketball practice, and you gotta you take off your shirt and you got your long arms flopping around, that's kind of the first thing that people might notice. Yeah.
I always called them gorilla arms. I have gorilla arms.
Sure.
My arms my fingers practically are at my knees when I'm standing.
Yes,
yours
exactly.
Are too.
I had a friend who would say, touch your knee. And I would touch my knee standing up. The other one I'll give you though, which is another nickname. I don't use these currently, but I think they're more fun. So I have a pretty unique middle name. My middle name is Manoa. It's like a Bible name. It's a pretty deep cut it's like Samson's dad. Yeah, not his mom. Like Samson's dad or someone
I don't
like that.
think I knew that was your middle name.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is a pretty unique one, and I think somehow that got brought up in my 6th grade class, and someone misheard it from a distance, and they thought that they said my middle name was Vanilla, as in the flavoring.
That's funny.
So most of the people in my 6th grade class just started calling me Vanilla, which
funny.
I feel like most of the nicknames that have stuck for me, I am neutral to. Like,
Right.
Sometimes it's not worth fighting them on it, and you think, well, this is not that bad to have. So yeah, if you want to know my nicknames, one of them is Vanilla and one of them is Monkey Arms.
Okay, good.
How about you?
Well, so I've had a few over the years. I don't know. I mean, but the ones that have stuck, and when I say stuck, I mean there are still people who call me that. I don't necessarily know that these have stuck, but the original one was C Money. That's been my name. That's been my nickname since like high school. People used to call me that as a joke. I don't really know why. I don't know, but I'll take it. I don't mind it. It's not something I ask people to call me that. And then in college, out of nowhere, people started calling me Chumfries. I did not like that very much.
Yeah.
But it stuck. Like people did it a lot, and so it was kind of like, I felt too bad to, like, at some point it was like, I should have stopped this early on and I didn't, and now it's too late for me to.
Yeah.
And no one calls me that anymore, praise the Lord. But like,
no one tell his son.
Yeah, because he'll definitely do it. But yeah, and this is the question that, like, I think it says a lot about a person, and so you don't have to answer this, we don't have to get into it, but what was your first gamer tag?
Yeah. Would you count like an AOL screen name in that?
I'll take that. Take that.
Yeah. So when I was 6 years old, I made my first email account, which came with my AOL screen name.
Okay.
And it was Video Game Freak 66.
Nice. Okay.
But FREAK was taken in Freak, so I spelled it FREEK. Which added a little bit of edge to that.
Are you telling me even the 66 that was taken?
I think Video Game Freak was.
I see.
And then I put Video Game FREAK 66, and that was taken.
Wow.
So then I flipped to whatever it was. Like,
right.
I think I probably could have gotten it, and I just left the EE because I thought it was like a fun style thing.
Sure.
But yeah, so I would say that is probably like a good example of like an early kind of like gamer tag-ish kind of thing.
My first gamer tag, still my current gamer tag, is Pretty Nifty 94.
Okay.
And it's not bad. I don't mind it.
Yeah, that's not that embarrassing.
What's annoying to me is that when I made the gamer tag, I didn't realize numbers made it like less cool. I put the numbers there on my own. Yeah. I didn't need to, probably, because I was early enough. I don't think anyone would have had Pretty Nifty, probably.
I doubt it.
And so I'm a little disappointed. But so that's, I don't know. Nicknames are kind of an interesting thing, but I've been reading a lot lately. I've always kind of read, but I've been reading more lately, I guess, than I have in the past. And one of my favorite authors through the years, and not all of his books, but a lot of his books, I really like Stephen King.
Yeah.
But some of my favorite books that are by Stephen King actually came out under a different name. And the name that he used to occasionally publish under back in the day is Richard Bachman.
Oh, wow. And
so there's a whole thing. They're now that people know it's him. But when they came out, people didn't know it was him, right? It was a pen name. It was a pseudonym, and he did this for many reasons. I guess we can get into it a little bit, but they're now referred to as the Bachman books. There's like 4 or 5 of them, and they're my favorite books by Stephen King.
Oh my
I
gosh.
love them, and it's just really interesting. But it's kind of an interesting story, I think. Basically, in the publishing market at the time, in the 70s and 80s, it's thought that like an author should put out 1 book a year maximum. That's just kind of, they don't want to oversaturate the market. And so as a writer, as a creative, as an artsy person who writes, like, a lot of people ended up like having more content than that, and they're they're thinking like, this is wasted, I could be making money on this, I want to put it out, like I like to do that. And so one of the answers to that people would do is come up with a pseudonym, come up with a fake name, and they release it under that so that they could continue writing, continue publishing things, and put it out under a different name. And so Stephen King was one of those who had a big backlog of books. He'd written all these things, and he wanted to get them out. But he was also kind of attaining this like this status in the book world. Like, people knew who Stephen King. They still do, right?
Right.
He's one of the most popular authors ever,
and
like he was gaining that status in the 70s and the 80s. He was writing these books that were getting they were selling a lot of copies. People liked anything that he put out, and so everything a publisher put out by him, they would sell like crazy. And so he kind of thought, are people buying my stuff now because it's my stuff, or do they actually think I'm a good writer? And so that kind of encouraged him to put out some of these other works by Richard Bachman. And it's interesting. Apparently, the story goes he was on the phone with his publisher trying to convince him of this, and they said, well, what name do you want to put it out under? He came up with, on the phone, Richard Bachman, because he had a book by Richard Stark on his desk, which is a pseudonym of another author he read.
Okay.
And a song was playing on the radio by a band called Bachman Turner Overdrive. And so he thought, Richard Bachman, right? Which... interesting.
A very good, plain, normal, boring name that
exactly.
no one would assume anything from.
Exactly. No one's going to think anything about it. But one of his Bachman books is called Thinner. It's a really interesting story. And it was his most popular. He actually did start to gain a little bit of popularity as Richard Bachman before anyone found out about it. And his most popular book by Richard Bachman that came out at the time was called Thinner, and it sold 28,000 copies.
Okay.
Which... he says that some of the reasons that it didn't sell that well overall could possibly be just because there's like categories of books that publishers publish, and they didn't push these books. They didn't market these books like they would a Stephen King book. You know what I mean? These kind of are like the mass market paperback sit in the bottom of a book bin kind of thing.
Right.
And so like that could have went into the reason they didn't sell as well as other books, maybe, but people did start to like them. They started to, it wasn't a bestseller by any means, but it was, it sold well. Like he made money off of these books.
That's cool.
It's also interesting that when he sold it, they've now re-released these books, obviously, under Stephen King.
Yeah.
And so when they re-released Thinner under the name Stephen King, it sold 228,000 copies. So it's like, it really is. I mean, it's a good book, but it's also like, the name says something about it. So I think he did learn in that experiment that I think he can write. You know what I mean? He has good things to say. He has interesting ways to put it. He knows how to write a character, and people do want to read about it. And I think they found out about that.
Whereas is he changing genres and style at all? Like, because whenever I hear about someone doing a pseudonym, I assume that this is, I think in the music world, kind of like a side project.
Yeah.
Like, this is not me. I now do this genre when I'm under this name. Do you feel like content-wise it was wildly different?
Yeah, it's not wildly different. It's still... they're not the same type of books. He kind of got known for horror books really early on. Right. They're not horror books necessarily. They're different than he would have written, but they are still written in his style. And that's actually what eventually gave it away. As somebody who was a big Stephen King fan ended up being like, I swear, there was like, there was a small group of people that thought, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is him. And then finally this guy basically went to like the Library of Congress and found his name on like a copyright sheet, right?
Nice.
But it turns out in publishing, like today, like pseudonyms are still a huge thing.
Yeah.
I know a professional author who has a pseudonym where they write like YA books, but like their pseudonym, they write like vampire romance.
Yes.
So like, and that's how it works now, is like a lot of times it's to be a separation from people know me for mystery. I'm not going to write a romance book. They're going to release a romance book under a different name.
Yes,
that's how a lot of it happens. But it turns out like across all of publications, like since publishing has been a thing with like books and novels and all that, about 1 in 10 books ever published are by a pseudonym. That's interesting, right?
I would not have guessed it was that
It's
high.
a lot, right?
Yeah.
And in certain genres such as romance, it's like it's like 40 or 50% still are by not, because a lot of people just don't want that name associated with.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
And Stephen King is a good example of this. It's famous and it's interesting, but there's one that I just learned about that's even more factoidy that I want to share with you today.
All right.
In the mid-20th century, the literary landscape, it turns out, was filled with, and I'm doing air quotes here, bad boys.
Ooh.
You know how every group has their like stereotype, right? Like the board game people are the nerds, right? And the drama people are like the, you know what I mean, weird over-the-top people, and coffee drinkers are hipsters and like this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, in the mid-20th century, the writers are the bad boys. Think like, I hope you get this reference. Think Harley Kiner in Boy Meets World. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I've watched a lot of Boy Meets World, but I don't.
He's
describe.
like the greaser with he's the bully, and Frankie's he's like the bully. He's the mean guy, right? He got the greased back hair, and
I'm sorry, I'm failing you right
that's
now.
okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
You'll know who
I'm. Yes,
you'll
exactly.
know who I'm talking about. You'll
Yes.
see it, and you're like, oh yeah, Harley Kiner.
Yes.
I know him. But just think him, and that's what these people. That's kind of what they were portraying. So some popular authors at the time would have been Norman Mailer and Ernest Hemingway, and they kind of had this reputation of like tough masculine guys, and they were always out practicing boxing and drinking whiskey and
drinking
smoking
themselves to death,
cigars.
yeah.
Yeah, that's like what these guys did. That's kind of how everyone knew them.
Yeah, books.
But there was this one guy who gained a large amount of following and gained a lot of popularity in France at the time, and his name was Romain Gary. And he was definitely a bad boy, but not in the same way. He was a war hero, so he was masculine, right? He was in war. He was a pilot. He was a successful pilot that flew in multiple combat missions. He was also a ladies' man. He ended up marrying Jean Seberg, who was, it turns out, and I didn't know this at the time, a very big movie star. And so he kind of lived the life of a Hollywood star himself because of his like adjacency to this industry.
Sure.
Like fancy cars and like all that kind of stuff, right? And because of this, he sort of seemed to make the traditional bad boy artists kind of jealous. He was also successful in the government, like as a diplomat. He worked many high-level jobs in the government while also being an author.
All right.
And what's interesting is that his writing kind of got famous and people kind of liked it because he was sort of mocking the establishment, even the establishment that he worked for. While all these things work together to put Gary in the bad boy category, the real thing that made him, I think, fall into this is that he really had an ego. He refused to be forgotten. He refused to be pushed to the side or not seen as a true artist, right? As a true author. In France, there is this award called the Prix Goncourt, which is basically the Super Bowl or the finals or the Grammy of the French literary world. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Okay, see, I hadn't either. The Prix Goncourt. And he, at the height of his writing days, he won this award. His novel was chosen, and his winning novel was about a guy who survived a Nazi concentration camp and had experienced human cruelty, and he had enough of it, and he decided that he's going to dedicate his life to protecting elephants from hunters. It's kind of an interesting story. I've never read it, but it's also like this philosophical discussion on the need for us to have like something larger than ourselves that we're a part of. It's kind of just this guy, I guess raging against the systems that he's been, but you know what I'm saying? And
Sure.
he's experienced all the negative of, and it was like this big epic thing, and it was kind of a modern story. It was kind of the first of its kind, and this book got a lot of high praise from critics. It got a lot of high praise from the people who read it, and this book was chosen to win this very prestigious award. And he was kind of the perfect candidate at the time, not just because of the success and the contents of this novel, but also because of who he was, because he was basically this war hero, and he was currently entrenched in the French government. He was basically their idea of like a true Frenchman, somebody who really deserved it, both what they did and the way they lived. The winner of this award is chosen by like this exclusive panel, this exclusive jury, and they kind of choose it based off of various things. I don't exactly know all the stipulations, but basically he ends up winning this award. They liked everything about him. And after this award, which is basically the top, right? He's at the top. He got older, and he started wanting to write in different styles and write about different things. And so he did that, and he changed. And critics decided to like him less. They kind of started to turn against him. They started to say things like he'd become washed up. Anything he could contribute to society was already gone. He was done. He had his time, but now there's new people.
Yeah,
right?
Not another vampire romance novel.
Exactly. And so this is kind of, I think, where the true bad boy comes out of Gary. His ego really kicked in because he's one who believes in himself, just as we all should. He was confident, just as we all should be. And when the critics turned against him, he turned against them. And he pulled off what is now considered one of the greatest cons in the history of the entire literary industry. See, the Prix Goncourt was the prize of all prizes, and because of that, there were very strict rules around who could win it and how they could win it. And once you won it, you were never allowed to win it again. It can only be it can be won one time. It's not like a thing you can get a bunch of. It's one and done. But he sort of used his fiction as a way that he could rebel against the systems. And so when critics started criticizing his work and saying he was washed up and out of touch, it kind of struck a chord with him. He wasn't happy. This is where the plan was born. Take back what was his and prove to himself and the world that he was worthy and still relevant. So, by the 1970s, he won this award in the 50s. By the 1970s, he started publishing quite a few books under the pseudonym Émile Azar. These novels begin to gain popularity almost instantly, which doesn't happen that much in the book world. These books basically worked on every level. They were critically acclaimed. The critics loved them. They sold really well, so people bought them, and they maintained all of the artistic integrity that Gary cared so much about in his previous work. He didn't compromise on anything. He did what he did. He just released it under a different name. The first novel that he came out with was widely accepted and claimed as a, quote, new voice of the generation by the critics. And these are the same critics that literally at the same time were calling him washed up. And so he, I think, got a lot of joy out of seeing that.
Oh, I bet.
He didn't just stop at using a fake name, though. In order for him to kind of continue on with this and make it believable, he actually hired his cousin Paul to be the physical representation of this author. And this guy would go out in public, and he would occasionally meet up with his publisher, and he would get seen in public so that no one would even question the validity of this person. This was Emil, right? This was the guy.
Oh, man.
And while he was the public face, while Paul was the guy who was out doing this stuff, anything that he ever did was very strictly managed and written and directed by Gary.
Sure. Yeah, I was thinking about how scary it would have to be from the cousin's perspective of just not screwing this up.
Right.
Because at least if you're an actor, someone might expect you to say a line and make it be convincing. But
Right.
if you're an author, there are fewer things like that. They're not
Right.
going to say, you could just tell them, like, read the book a bunch of times, memorize.
Right.
I don't know. I think it's easier to fake, than
For sure. And so I think it was a tough job for this guy, for sure. But in 1975, Emile Azar's novel was chosen to win the Prix Goncourt by the exact same jury that chose Gary's 20 years before. He tried to, at this time, with the help of his lawyer, refuse this award. He thought, I don't really want to, I don't need to win the award. The public found out about that, and that made people even crazier about him and his work. The fact that he's trying to be like, no, I don't need this award. And so through a bunch of discussion and legal stuff that I don't really understand, it turns out because the award went to the book and not the author, they still granted it to him, and he couldn't turn it away, really. Like, it was like a thing where the author has no say. You get this award. So this book wins this award. This made Romain Gary the first and last person ever to win this award 2 times. And it's kind of an interesting commentary on, like, society and why people like things. I feel like I've heard people talk about their stories, or like YouTubers make videos like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel and not going to show my face and see if I can do it again. Like, can you replicate what you do? And he thought, certainly I can do this again. And it turns out he could do it again. Even without his name, even without his following attached, he did it again from nothing. It seems that he really was that good. And what's even more interesting is that literally no one knew about this until he died. Nobody knew.
Oh, wow.
There were officially like 4 people that knew. It was Paul, the guy who was him.
Yes.
Right? His ex-wife, the actor, his son, and his lawyer. These are the only 4 people that knew, and they didn't tell. Like, they didn't tell. They didn't let it out. This was like a very well-kept secret.
That's awesome.
The public eye of this were completely fooled. Sadly, in 1980, Gary committed suicide, and he left behind a note that he titled The Life and Death of Emile Azar. And it detailed in the note exactly how he did it, exactly why he did it, and he mocked all the critics that had used... There were even critics that used the writings of Azar to bash the career of Romain Gary. And he made kind of a mockery of them. And so in the end, it's not what I had hoped to read, but it does make a point. Success doesn't equal happiness. So let this story be a reminder that we all contain multitudes. We're complex, we're not simple, and always remember, you are who you are no matter how you package
it. I have a long-term goal of becoming a polyglot, or someone who can speak several different languages.
Okay.
I don't know if it just means more than 2 or if it's 4. I don't know what the level is before it counts, but that's something that I've wanted to do at some point in my life. And I enjoy the ability that comes with that, of being able to interact with a wide variety of people, watch different kinds of media. I think that's kind of the allure for me. And I got a little taste of this just as I've been learning German for a bit now. I feel like I bring it up a lot here. But back in December, though, I flew to Boston in order to take a 3-hour German test where if I passed it, I got an official certificate that says I'm average at speaking the language. And we'll talk about how that went in a little bit. But for this year, though, I've been taking a bit of a break from learning German to start learning French, which this would be, in theory, the 3rd language if I'm able to follow it down the road long enough to be able to count it. And I think it's going to be an uphill battle. I've been doing this for about a month now. The silent letters, still pretty tricky, really trying to get my mouth in the right shape just because I need to form my mouth differently to make some of the sounds. So I've been thinking, why should I go down the path of learning these long, difficult languages if there are some easier routes maybe I could take to padding my stats a bit, getting that language count as high as possible with the least amount of work.
Okay.
So I've been kind of looking into some different kinds, and I thought that maybe I should study a language that was purposely designed instead of just evolving naturally. And they call those kind of languages constructed languages, or conlangs for short.
Well, okay.
Yeah, and I'd say probably the most popular conlang is Esperanto. Are you familiar with Esperanto?
No.
Yeah, it was really big in like the late 1800s. There was a point in time where people thought this was actually going to catch on. The goal was, can we have like a worldwide language that is easy enough for most of the world to learn? And eventually it kind of fizzled out, and in a lot of ways, like English, Mandarin, a couple of these like big languages kind of took over as what most of the world just tries to speak in order.
Does anyone still speak this?
I think there's probably I bet there's probably like tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 people. It's not no one, but it's not very big these days. So that's probably the most popular one. And I think they even put out a sequel to it called Esperanto 2, where they fixed the grammar in more recent years. Like, imagine calling a language, blank 2. But that's still a pretty big undertaking. So I thought I need to go even simpler, even quicker. And I found 2 conlangs that I've been wanting to learn over the last few months. So first I want to talk to you about the conlang that's considered the world's smallest language.
Okay.
It's called Toki Pona. And Toki Pona was created by a Canadian translator and polyglot named Sonia Lang. And she started working on the language in around 2001, but she didn't really consider it to be complete until 2014 when she put a book out for it, which it's weird, the idea of talking about a language being done, just because it's like, languages are kind of living in a way. So she had been dealing with depression, and she was wondering if she could create a language, could it help her simplify her thoughts and promote positive thinking in her life? And her thought was, if the language is so small, that maybe it would help simplify things like that and help be a way to sort of treat her depression in a way. So the language contains, depending on who you ask, between 100 and 150 words. There's some debates on what counts as a word and what doesn't. But by comparison, like a major English dictionary is going to have 500,000.
Okay.
So you might not be using 500,000 words in your life, but like comparatively to 150 words, it's a pretty big difference. And Toki Pona, it can use the Latin alphabet like English does, but it does have its own alphabet of sorts called Citilen Pona, and it's kind of like a pictogram, so every word has its own little pictogram for it. And a couple of years ago, Lang published The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, translated into Toki Pona, written in the Citilen Pona pictographs, which I am not going to pick that up and learn. But man, imagine like being at a library and like opening that book.
Yeah.
So when you have a language with so few words in it, you can kind of guess how quickly it gets difficult to talk about complicated things.
Yes.
Like, how do you do that? So words in Toki Pona have several different potential meanings when you translate them into English. So if I wanted to say the phrase computer game in Toki Pona, one translation that I saw for that would be Utala Musi Piilo Sona, which would be fun competition with a knowledge tool. So it's kind of difficult, but you can string together things, and if you have some context is very important in Toki Pona. You can kind of figure out what someone is trying to say. But it gets even harder when you're getting into self-expression. So there are Toki Pona musicians out there, and they will write and sing songs entirely in Toki Pona. Some of them will put English subtitles in order to explain what they're talking about.
That's funny.
And other ones just choose not to. They will just put it in the Citilen Pona pictograms.
That's funny.
And the whole point is that like music is something that's all about you're entitled to your own interpretation. There's many ways you could take my art. So they just take this to the nth degree and say, yeah, I'm not even going to tell you which words I'm using. You have to guess what I'm talking about, basically. So that's the first conlang that I've been kind of learning about. But now I want to tell you about a second conlang, and it's found on a plate at your local Waffle House. If you were to work as a cook at Waffle House, you would be exposed to the magic marker system. Have you been to a Waffle House recently?
Not recently. I think I've only been to one like maybe once or twice in my whole life.
Okay. I went to Waffle House a lot in college. We would go to the Waffle House in Sunbury right off one of the exits kind of between Mount Vernon and Columbus. Maybe, I don't know, once or twice a year. I hadn't went up to that point. But like overall, I don't find myself at a Waffle House a lot, but I have a lot of fond memories of it.
Sure.
But yeah, so the cooks there, they use this system that is called the magic marker system, and they call it magic because it is a coded language hidden in plain sight to the customer. And so in like a typical diner, you have your server, your waiter, they're going to write down your order on the little like pad and the paper with the pen. And then they have the ticket, and then they're going to hand that to the cook who's in the back. And then they look at the ticket and they read it and they say, okay, this is what the customer wants. And that way you can remember what you're supposed to be cooking and make sure the order comes out correctly. That is not how they do it at Waffle House. The waiter does write down the order, and they have like a special check boxes for certain things. But then they call this out to the Waffle House cook, and basically this is when the languages switch. So basically they create Waffle House-based hieroglyphics on a plate temporarily in order to remember the order instead of just taking a ticket. Because one of the unique things about Waffle House is that you are kind of like cooking out in the open. There's not like that traditional like closed off kitchen. So I can go into more detail on this because I watched a 25-minute corporate training video that Waffle House put out to explain how to do this. So you start with an empty plate. Usually it's an oval plate. They have circle plates, and that means something else, but typically it's the oval. And then one of the most common elements of the magic marker system is the jelly packet. And jelly packets, for the most part, represent eggs. And if you take a jelly packet and put it on the left side of your plate, along with an upside-down butter packet, that means the customer wants 2 eggs over easy with wheat toast. And the positioning of the jelly packet changes the way that the eggs are cooked. Sometimes like a jelly packet might get flipped upside down. That might mean something. Sometimes if you stack if you put more jelly packets on top, that means more eggs based off the normal amount. There are so many little modifiers like this. But if you go beyond eggs, this is everything on the menu. If I want to order a sirloin steak that is medium well, I'm going to put a ketchup packet 4/5 of the way up the plate. Because the 5 spots are the rare, medium,
and ketchup
medium
is
well.
Steak.
Yes, and ketchup means steak.
And jelly is eggs.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes. And for a lot of the sandwiches, they have pickles, and they will put pickles in certain spots on the plate. And this is a new fear for me because I hate everything pickles, and to know that even if I ordered a sandwich with no pickles, they're still going to put pickles on my plate and take them off.
That's funny.
Yes. So as I was learning about this, I obviously had to go check this out in person. Yeah. So I talked to my friend Adam, and he and I went to our local Waffle House that actually got remodeled a couple of years ago. So it's like a pretty clean, modern Waffle House. What's funny is it was a Waffle House before. It's right next to my office. They tore it to the ground and built it back up.
Built a new Waffle House.
As a new Waffle House. Yeah, I don't think they saved any of the building, which is bizarre. But hey, it's a great place to go to. So like we tried to get good seats. We had to make sure that we could see the kitchen staff well.
Right.
I wanted to see, can I spot this in the wild? And they started doing it, and I had to like calm myself down. Like, oh my gosh,
like this is a real thing.
Yes, he's sprinkling the 2 hash browns on the corner, and I see the jelly packets moving.
This feels to me like almost like the most rudimentary version of like a national treasure.
Yes.
Like we're about to unlock a secret here.
Exactly. And the secret is like a $10 breakfast that's really good. It goes deeper. Yeah. So like obviously I'm being a little silly by calling the magic marker system a language. But our earliest written languages did start as pictograms. Think of your cave paintings on the wall or things like that. And over time, the pictograms start to morph into letters, and they start to lose the literal connotations. So you can imagine a scenario where you start off with the jelly packet on the Waffle House plate, and in 1,000 years, you have like an oval shape with like a square filled in on the left, maybe, and that's just like a letter in an alphabet. Yep. That's now what we call Q or something like that. There's an evolution to starting as like a symbol and turning into something that's a little bit more flexible. And I've heard multiple people compare the magic marker system to the Egyptian style of hieroglyphics in the way that they are so efficient. Each individual symbol in the pictogram carries much more meaning than a letter or even some words in alphabet-based languages. So this encodes information a lot more efficiently than English and significantly more than Toki Pona, as we were learning. But the trade-off is that there are just fewer symbols and especially like fewer symbols for self-expression. You can find a way to express yourself in Toki Pona, but it might take a little while. Waffle House, though, they aren't about to introduce new symbols that mean I quit or stop fighting over there. So while, those might be things you want to say while you're working in a Waffle House, you kind of can't. And I spent a lot of time trying to understand why this language was invented. And it was a lot harder to find than I thought, because I kept finding these legends about like this illiterate chef in 1955 and how he came up with this. And there was a lot of things about illiteracy. And I know that like illiteracy was a problem in the U.S. like back in the 50s when Waffle House was founded, a lot more than it is today. But I can't find anything about this fabled chef. He doesn't have a name. I don't think he's real.
Yeah.
And the magic marker system was also very hard to triangulate when it was introduced, but I think it was around 2007.
Oh, so it's pretty new.
Yes.
Oh,
So I think that it is like completely unrelated. And the most credible story that I'd heard is that there were some cooks who worked at Waffle House because before this was invented, you just had to memorize all of the orders. And think about how complicated that is.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I have a pretty good memory in general, but the idea of trying to memorize these orders, not screwing them up, maybe there's two of us in the kitchen that are working simultaneously and we have to coordinate. Eventually these cooks realized, let's just come up with some shorthand terms to like better communicate on our small team. And then I think corporate heard about this and thought, oh, this is a good idea. We're going to take this to all of the other franchises.
Yeah.
So it's cool that it was like a kind of like a bottom up thing as opposed to a top down, because with my wife working in the restaurant industry, I realized how difficult it is to work in a restaurant and how underappreciated oftentimes like a cook is going to be, especially at a chain like a Waffle House. So I read that as far as like a decisions per minute kind of metric for restaurant workers, they have one of the highest decisions per minute out of any type of job other than like air traffic controller or things like that. So the fact that they were able to, you have your kitchen out in the open, so in some ways you can't really hide. You have to be kind of putting on a good face the whole time. You're cooking fast, you're cooking well, and you're writing in a language, and you're doing it so sneakily the customer doesn't even know what's going on. I feel like that is very impressive that they're able to do what they have done. So between Toki Pona and the Waffle House magic marker system, I really started thinking about what the point of a language really is and how it affects us. There is the obvious part where speaking words communicates a statement, but for the past 200 years, many people have studied whether the construction of our language can affect the way we perceive our world around us. This is a concept called linguistic relativity. And here are a couple examples that have been debated over the years. So one of them is with the Russian language. They have two different words for our word blue. One of them is a little bit darker and a little bit less saturated, and one of them is a little bit lighter and a little bit more saturated. And researchers have tried several different times to understand if the Russians are better at identifying different types of blue than English speakers because they have different words for it. So they would like run studies and they would say, categorize all these blues, and you say, is it this one or that one in Russian? And then in English, they would say, is this light blue or dark blue? And they would kind of compare. And it seems like the Russians were better at categorizing the two blues than the English speakers when they had to do the light blue and dark blue. And then on the other hand, French kids have been really struggling with math because their number system is so screwed up. So as I just got to the lesson where I'm starting to learn my numbers in French, and numbers between 80 and 100 are the worst. So in order to say 99, you basically say 4, 20, 10, 9. Because back in the Middle Ages, a lot of numbers were on a base 20 system instead of the base 10 system we use today. So most countries and their languages flipped to base 10, but French flipped most of it to base 10 and kept certain parts in base 20. So because of this, though, and because it's not consistent across all numbers, the side effect is that children in France take longer to master mental math because of the way the numbers are named.
That makes sense.
So most other French-speaking countries have actually found ways to change this. Like they've come up with more sensible ways to make 90, 910 or things like that.
Yeah.
But France just like sticks to it, and they say it is like 4-20, I think is roughly how that is said, which is 4 and 20.
And
there are probably a million more of these kind of things that I've come across. But the question is, how much are these people's lives truly being shaped by the advantages or disadvantages given to them by their language? And this is a hotly debated topic in the world of linguistics. So I knew that I needed to get in contact with any linguists that I could and find someone who could give me a real answer. And last week, I had the pleasure of sitting in on a linguistics seminar at Ohio State University.
Wow.
It was open to the public and free.
Okay.
And the guest speaker was a man named Adam Alexic, different Adam from Waffle House. And Adam Alexic is better known online as Etymology Nerd. Do you know who this guy is?
I don't think so.
Okay, I've been following him for a few years now.
Okay.
So he's really
That's
big on
cool.
Yeah, he's big on like TikTok and Instagram. He's a pretty young guy, and he likes to make videos about different trends in like modern language and how it is evolving. So he like wrote a book about like how algorithms kind of change the way that we speak in real life and things of that sort. So he travels around to a lot of different places and schools and just gives like talks and things like that. So he finishes a seminar and then he opens up to a Q&A. So I was the first person to ask Etymology Nerd a question, and I asked him about linguistic relativity. And I asked, if I only knew the languages of Toki, Pona, and the Waffle House magic marker system, would that change the way I perceive the world? And then after the entire room stopped laughing, just how like ridiculous of a question this was, Etymology Nerd did say that, you know, he's familiar with the magic marker system, but he lives in New York and they don't have Waffle House there. So he's never eaten at a Waffle House, but he is familiar with it though. And then he actually did confirm all of my research. So he said that he does believe in linguistic relativity, and he likened it to wearing a pair of glasses, where you can, your eyes are the ones that are seeing, and your glasses affect how you see, but it's not like the glasses are what truly give you sight. Or if you're a carpenter, everything kind of looks like a nail, like that kind of metaphor. So it's definitely like affecting how you would perceive things. However, he said that it shouldn't prevent you from having thoughts outside of those languages. But then he did pause for a second and he said, but I also don't have an internal monologue. So then he was kind of wondering for a moment about like, well, okay, well, what if I did only know those languages? But this kind of means, though, that I would still be able to understand, say, quantities of objects if my language had no numbers in it. There's actually an indigenous group called the Piraha, and they only have numbers for one, and they have a number for some. They don't really specify specific numbers like 7 or 25 or whatever. So if their language doesn't get specific about quantities, though, it's not that they are incapable of understanding a quantity. It's more a symptom that they just don't care about quantities.
Sure.
That, like, you know, think about it like in most things in life other than, say, money. Like, if you have 75 of something or 79 of something, how big of a deal is it if you have 75 versus 79?
Right, almost like nothing.
Doesn't really affect your life very much unless you live in some sort of culture where you have so much of something that you have to quantify it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately for my personal research purposes, there is not a single person out there that only speaks Toki Pona or only speaks the Waffle House magic marker system or both of them. So they can just go back to thinking in their native language, and if they have any complicated thoughts that don't exist in these two. Etymology Nerd and most modern scholars agree that a specific language on its own cannot truly change how someone views the world. It usually is tied to cultural values as well. So I was thinking about baseball. Baseball has made a big impact on America over the past 150 years. And today, though, I spend more time giving ballpark estimates for projects at work than I do time spent in an actual ballpark. And words can kind of drift from their original meanings over time as they just assimilate into our culture, but they're still rooted in the idea of America loving baseball. The culture shapes that worldview, and the language is only a symptom of that culture. Learning Toki Pona isn't inherently going to simplify your life or make your life more enjoyable. You would have to decide, I want to have a simpler life. One of the ways I'm going to do that is by learning Toki Pona, but I also need to do probably some other things along the way if you really want to make your life be simpler. And during the talk, Etymology Nerd did mention that there are basically two different uses for language. The more practical version is sharing information with others. But there's also the aspect of language as a ritual. I'm not talking with you just to be informed. I'm talking with you to bond or form some sort of relationship. He kind of gave the example of like a water cooler talk where you're not really you're not trying to get like important information, but it's still something that some people at least might value to do. And I'm sure some of you out there might be thinking that learning a language seems kind of trivial these days just because of translation software and apps. That they are getting really good. I use them for a lot of different things. But I also feel like that there's a difference between just merely completing the task and completing the task but making friends along the way.
Sure.
As cliche as that might sound, you're cutting out that human element sometimes by purely relying on just getting the information transferred. And this is why I feel like it's so important to speak different languages. So I wanted to get back to that Boston trip with that German test. I technically failed that test by one question. I passed the reading, I passed the writing, I passed the speaking, and I failed the listening, yes, by just one question. So I got like a 57%. I needed a 60%. And, obviously that was a bummer, but that wasn't the part that I remember the most from that experience. I remember getting to talk with a Russian teenager about his study abroad program. I did an improv scene with a middle-aged Colombian woman where we pretended to plan a party for like our imaginary friend. And I got to talk to a woman who was a whole grade level below us in the German language program, but she was trying to emigrate, and this was her last deadline, her last chance to take a test. So she kind of had this as a Hail Mary to see, can I pass this test? And if I do, then I can go study abroad. And I have no idea how she did. But these are the experiences that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't went in to try to take the test. And as we all waited around between test times, sometimes we'd have to just sit around for an hour and wait for someone else to show up and administer the next part. We would just be asking each other about like, hey, why are you here? What are you doing? And I was able to look them dead in the eye and say, I'm here for fun. And that was definitely not the response that they were expecting. But like, I was here for bonding through language just as much as I was to kind of regurgitate all of the things I learned onto the test and to try to pass that. So I can't say that one specific language has drastically changed the way that I perceive the world, but I'm starting to catch some glimpses of it in my life. At the end of the seminar with Etymology Nerd, someone asked him what his favorite word was. The guy was actually kind of self-conscious about it because there was all these like very like industry specific jargon and all those things. And the guy says, I'm just curious what your favorite word is.
That's funny.
So then he pulls open his shirt and he's got a tattoo in his arm. And he says, well, my favorite word is Umwelt. And I've got it tattooed here. And he says, it means the world as it is perceived by a particular organism. As I was leaving, I heard a few people talking about this. And I leaned over and I said, doesn't that word just mean environment in German? Does it really mean that whole big thing? And one of the guys who kind of looked like a professor there probably, he says, well, yes, but it's a lot more than that. And he says that the prefix of the word means around, and that implies that you are a part of this larger thing, that it is surrounding you and you are a part of it. And I never thought about the environment being something that I'm in right now. I usually thought of it more as something that I'm going out to visit, I guess you could say. And I think that's partially because the root word of environment is environ, which used to be a word, but no one says environ anymore, and it's lost its meaning. In the same way, all of my baseball ballpark terms have kind of started to lose their baseball meaning over time. And because of that, it kind of affected the way that I was perceiving my world because of the ways that our language has evolved. And it fits what we've been talking about today. I've known the word Umwelt for several years, but I always thought of it as this very rigid textbook definition. And now I'm realizing that a lot of Germans care a lot about the environment, and partially that might be due to other reasons, but I think part of it is due to the word that they have for environment reminds them that this is something that they're a part of and they need to take care of it, as opposed to maybe the way that our word for environment maybe doesn't immediately kind of scream that. The etymology of the word is just more apparent than ours, and it can change the way that people see the world around them. So I would challenge you, Chris, and our listeners to just think about how your perception of the world is influenced by your culture, but specifically by your language. Just as you go about your day and you're saying words or you use an idiom or a slang term, just kind of think about like, what does that go back? Like, what does that harken back to? What's the root of that? Was this from a certain time in culture when, is this a reference to the hippies, but I don't even know it because it's been 70 years since then? Or like every Monday, I have a meeting at work called the Creative Team Roundup. And I was thinking about that. And Roundup, that goes back to herding cattle. And then I was thinking like that's kind of comes from our romanticism of the American Wild West. And like, do I think it's a problem that we have a meeting that kind of like reminds us of the American Wild West? No, it's probably fine. But it does make me think that depending on the origin of some of our words, we can kind of bury things into our language every day and not really realize how that passively affects how we view things. So if you've liked what you heard today and you want to learn Toki Pona, there is a Discord server and a Facebook group where pretty much only the world's correspondence of Toki Pona is happening at right now.
That's fun.
But you can join that and people talk, and it's a fun time. And if you want to become fluent in the magic marker system, I suppose you can apply to go work at your nearest Waffle House. Thank you for listening to the Factoid Podcast. If you have a factoid that you want to share with us, send us an email at whatsyours@factoidpodcast.com.
You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts or on our website, factoidpodcast.com.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.